Hello, and welcome to our series, Conversations on Zionism, Reclaiming the Narrative. I'm Russell Robinson, Chief Executive Officer of Jewish National Fund USA. The time has come to be the voice of what Zionism really is. We're exposing the beautiful and diverse facets and facts of Zionism. Join me on this journey, together with Conversations on Zionism, Reclaiming the Narrative. This is Zionism.
Shalom and welcome to the JNF's Conversations on Zionism series. Tonight's panel is about the media's relationship with Israel. And we are privileged to have here in our panel Melanie Phillips, who is a British journalist, broadcaster, and best-selling author. Her weekly column, which currently appears in the Times of London, has been published over the years in The Guardian, Observer, Sunday Times, and Daily Mail. Dovid Efune is the publisher and chairman of the New York Sun newspaper and vice chairman of the Allgemeiner website. He is a regular guest on the major TV channels CBS, NBC, Fox News, and CNN. And finally, Annika Hernroth-Rothstein is a Swedish author and journalist. Ms. Rothstein has worked for such outlets as the Wall Street Journal, Foreign Policy, the Washington Examiner, and National Review, and she recently published her first book, Exiled: Portraits of the Jewish Diaspora. Ms. Rothstein currently resides in West Africa, where she works as a political advisor. I'm Gil Hoffman, the chief political correspondent and analyst of the Jerusalem Post, and I've had the privilege of speaking in all 50 states, including many for JNF. And one of the questions that I've asked more than any other question that I'm going to point to our panel today is the world media really out to get us? Or are we just like sports fans who don't like when the announcers are objective? Melanie, you can answer first.
Hello, everybody. I don't think the media is self-consciously out to get us, but there is a tremendous inbuilt set of assumptions, all of which are entirely wrong about the state of Israel. And we can perhaps talk about why those assumptions have come to be. But they act as a kind of prism through which virtually all journalists, certainly in Britain, in my experience, view the Middle East, even those who are sympathetic to Israel or think they're sympathetic, labor under a set of delusions and illusions, because quite simply, various crucial truths about the history of the Jewish people in the Middle East, the history of the State of Israel, the history of pre-Israel Palestine under the British Mandate, and all the rest of it, these things are simply unknown. And even those journalists and others who are sympathetic to Israel very often labor under the delusion, for example, that Israel should be supported because it came into being as a result of the Holocaust. There is absolutely no comprehension or knowledge of the history of the last century and the fact that the international community, the precursor to the United Nations, ordained that the Jewish people alone should have the right to resettle their ancient homeland, precisely because they were the only people for whom it was their ancient homeland.
Wonderful answer. Thank you so much. David, same question. Is the world media really out to get Israel?
Well, the truth is that you're probably dealing with a variety of causes. You have ignorance, you have apathy, you certainly have malice in some sectors of the media, certain prominent individuals included among them. But the bottom line result is the same, that there are significant deficiencies, and that's a nice way of putting it, in how major media outlets cover the Jewish people and the Jewish state, its place in the world, the threats and challenges that it faces on a regular basis. And specifically, as Melanie points out, this failure to understand, to comprehend, and therefore to present the full and accurate picture, I would go so far as to say is the cause, an underlying cause of physical threats and even a threat to life that many vulnerable Jewish communities face around the world, in Europe certainly, and nowadays in the United States as well.
Lastly, Annika, please tell us your point of view on whether the media is out to get Israel or whether we're just sports fans who don't like objective analysis.
Well, I mean, my fellow panelists put it very well. I will say that no, of course, not consciously, most of them not consciously. I don't necessarily separate between Israel and the Jews in this sense, because I think it factors in, of course, that it's the Jewish state, and there's a lot of underlying animosity or bias or even underlying anti-Semitism that people tend to be unaware of, because it's like the air that people breathe, because it goes back so far. But the result is still the same, whether or not they do it consciously or not. I see an attack against us, and by us, then I mean both Israel and the Jews in the media, and there's certainly a bias consistently.
As students who aren't necessarily Jewish, getting to go on Caravan for Democracy allows us to speak in a way to the nuance of Israel.
Well, with the second question, I'd like to start with Annika, because you told me in advance of the show that you might be bringing some gloom, and gloom
Everywhere
is very
I go.
often something that happens when Jews are talking together. So, Annika, have we surrendered and just accepted that we can't get mainstream media to be fair to Israel?
Well, so I wouldn't call it a surrender. I can start by speaking for myself, who's, I've been referred to as an activist too many times. I dislike it very much. Because I don't think we should be. I find it a bit worrying and insulting the way we sometimes act, journalists on Twitter and in any other media space, this constant need to defend ourselves, explain things. I had a bit of a, come to Moses moment during the last conflict. Because I found I was very upset. I was here, and I spent, like many Jews and many Jewish journalists, I spent most of my time on Twitter, and I tweeted, in exasperation, that there's no point to this. They really don't care. Why am I spending all my time explaining, defending, when I should be hanging out, when I should go to shul or hang out with fellow Jews and do Jewish things, rather than fight with people who have no real care for me, or who doesn't want to understand. I guess that's my point, that have we surrendered? Well, in my case, no, I spend my time on other things. I guess that the people I would rather talk to are fellow Jews, who also, by the way, can be problematic. In my opinion, but I would rather speak to them than speak to someone and come hat in hand as a Jew and try to say, please let me exist now, and please let, my country defend itself. Because in that sense, I'm not surrendered. I'm just sick and tired, maybe.
Sick and tired. Got it.
Yes.
Dovid, are you sick and tired? You think that we've surrendered or just accepted that we can't get mainstream media to be fair to Israel, or are we fighting the fight?
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Annika, but I don't share your pessimism, and it's not because anything that you said is incorrect. I think we as a people need to remind ourselves who we are and where we come from. We're the people that build the temples of Solomon and David. We're the people who, when we were forced to become money lenders, for example, reinvented money lending. We're the people who were chased from country to country, resettled and built industries and economies wherever we went. We're the people who, when life gives us lemon, we don't just make lemonade, we build lemon factories. So, new challenges, that's true. And they're very significant challenges. But I think our approach as individuals, as a community, has to be to focus on how we rise to the challenge, to the challenges that we face. And if that means understanding this information age, the rise of new media and how it can be harnessed to ensure that our voice comes across loud and clear, then every single Jewish institution needs to focus their energies on achieving that result, if that was what's called for today. When we had a land in Israel that was barren, we figured out how to irrigate it. When we needed arms to fight for our state, we figured out how to smuggle them in. We are a people of innovation, of creativity. We're certainly not a people that gives up. So let's get to work.
Good for you, Dovid. Now, Melanie, I'm sure I'm speaking for all the people who are watching this, appreciate the fight that you've been leading for so long in fighting for Israel in the mainstream media. Surely you haven't surrendered and accepted that it's too hard to get the mainstream media to be fair.
No, I haven't surrendered in the sense that I think it's an absolute duty for Jews to stand up and basically record and tell the truth wherever possible, and to stand up against the lies in defense of our own people. And I also think there are a number of people who are well-disposed, good people of conscience, who simply are ignorant and who need to hear facts and truths about Israel, Jewish people in the Middle East. And I think that does have a chance of changing their minds. There are many people for whom their minds simply can't be changed because they have an animus, an ideological hostility, and those people, or they are anti-Jew, they're anti-Semitic. Those people, are a lost cause, but there are many people who are not a lost cause. But it's kind of you to say, I've led the fight in the mainstream media. That's not quite true, because the mainstream media, I can only speak about Britain. I mean, that's the only country that I really know. But the mainstream media in Britain does not provide platforms for the likes of me to speak about Israel. It provides platforms for many Jews, provided those Jews either don't speak about Israel or say things which the mainstream media want to hear, which is basically that Israel is generally in the wrong, generally an abuser of human rights, generally the aggressor in the region. Now, unless you actually say that or imply that, as a Jew, you don't get onto mainstream media platforms. Now, I write for the Times of London. That's a tremendous platform. And I am occasionally able to write about these things, but I'm expected mainly to write about British domestic issues for the Times. So again, it's a little tricky. I smuggle in these thoughts whenever I can onto BBC platforms, but my goodness me, they don't often give me the opportunity. So given that I have been up against all these constraints, which I have to say have been getting worse and worse over many years, I won't engage on Twitter. I think that is a lost cause. I think that Twitter is inhabited mainly by people who are either mad, either crazy, or just terminally stupid. And it's just not worth the bother of all the venom that comes your way. But I have a blog. I blog on a wonderful Substack platform. It's melaniephillips.substack.com. And that's where I consider I write my most important pieces, apart from the pieces I write for the Jewish News Syndicate, which is a wonderful platform, but it's a syndicate, as the name implies, which reaches mainly the Jewish community, and that's terrific. But I want to reach more than the Jewish community. And so my blog on melaniephillips.substack.com reaches, I know, a lot of people in Britain and the English-speaking world, many of whom are Jews and many of whom are not Jews. And I know that because they write to me. And it's very interesting what they write to me. Some of them are abusive, but not many. Most of them write in either support or in puzzlement. They say, why don't I ever hear these things said in the mainstream media? And at that point, you realize not only is it important for us, people like me and the people on this Zoom call tonight, it's not only just important for us to say these things, but we can actually reach people if we can find the platforms from which to do so.
Indeed, Melanie. And you're the only one in this panel who, like me, is coming from Israel. It's wonderful that we have America, Israel, and Western Africa here all coming together. So I want to give you an opportunity to explain, what is Israel doing wrong when it comes to promoting itself? Because so many of the people, when I speak at JNF events, complain about that.
I think a speedier answer to your question would be if you asked me, what is Israel doing right? And I would say virtually nothing. They haven't got a clue about what drives anti-Israelism in the West. Not a clue. They think they know, they have no idea. They don't understand the culture which is producing this. Again, I can only really speak about how it's seen in Britain, but it's always seemed to me, as I said before, there are a lot of people in Britain who are decent, conscience-driven individuals who care about things like law and human rights. And above all, they care about fairness because they're British. Fairness is the sort of driving principle of their perspective, their worldview. Now, they believe that Israel is on the wrong side of all these things: fairness, rule of law, human rights, the things that they in Britain really care about. They believe that Israel's on the wrong side of those things because they have been taught lies for decades. And if I come along, as I do whenever I can, and say to them, for example, Israel, the Jewish people are the only people as a people for whom the land of Israel was ever their national kingdom. It was their national kingdom for several centuries before Islam was even created. If I say that to people in Britain, they look at me as if I'm mad, because they know, as a matter of fact, that the people who were the original inhabitants of the land of Israel were the Palestinians. Now, historically, logically, rationally, this is absolutely ludicrous. And so I tell them, and it's the first time anyone has ever told them. Now, when I say to Israelis, as I have done over the years to various people in positions of some power, why don't you say these things? Why don't you say that? And they look at me as if I'm mad and say, why should we, alone of all the people of the world, have to justify our existence? And I say, well, that's not very helpful. That's in fact pretty arrogant and pretty stupid, because you can make a great deal of difference if you say that.
I actually want to go back to Annika and ask about whether social media could be the solution. Is this an opportunity to bypass mainstream media, or does that present too great a challenge? You as a social media expert, is this good or bad for Israel?
Well, I mean, I think it can be good for the Jews. So I'll start there, because I know for a fact that, I'm a diaspora Jew, and it's given me a great deal of comfort to reach out to other Jews during times of conflict or just generally. It has built a community for us to speak within. I agree with Melanie that, yes, it is a marketplace of, foolishness. Of course it is. We all know that, and yet some of us persist. But it can be good in the sense that we debate issues, of course, and I do as well. As much as I feel somewhat resigned to it, there are times I cannot help myself. Does it bypass anything? I'm not sure. My gloominess comes from, and maybe that comes from being, a Swedish Jew, I don't know, or maybe I'm just gloomy from birth. But I believe that there's a general sentiment towards Jews that is not going anywhere anytime soon. And that it's through Israel's, the thing I care about is, of course, the strength and stability and survival of the state of Israel, because I know that it doesn't matter how many years has passed since its creation, we will always need it. There will come a time, as a European Jew, you kind of carry your passport in your back pocket, at least mentally and emotionally at all times. That's what I care about more than anything. As far as, the New York Times or any other European outlets and their perception of Israel, I don't see that changing. I think that the Substack revolution has been really, really good for us. There are new ways of expressing yourself. I know that, it reaches new places, but I have a sense that it's difficult to reach new minds. And that's my frustration, that it's very difficult to reach these people who are in an aggressive stance, because it's so easy for us to just go to war with each other. So I will say, in all humility, that I don't know how to reach those people that come from, the very aggressive stance towards Israel. The ones that are, 15%ers, yes, that there we can have a conversation. And in that case, social media is great for that, I think. Because that's also where everybody, me included, get their news now.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for what you've done in social media in doing your best in that uphill battle. Dovid, how much more of a challenge is it to pass on Zionism to the next generation when there is this media distortion?
Well, look, when it comes to passing on any values, the values that our children end up sticking with are a product of a number of different things, but obviously their family, their home, their community, their school, their environment, and making sure that we can impart those values early and frequently. Having said that, the point that you make is an accurate one, that figures show today that young people could consume up to 10.5 hours of media every single day. That's media defined as all forms of mass communication. So when you see kids walking around glued to their cell phones, and you add that to the screen time, and you add that to the computer games, and you put it all together, it occupies a huge percentage of their time, probably more time than they spend sleeping in most cases. So in that sense, it becomes very important for us as a community to ensure that the access will be available to the right types of information. So when somebody or a young person is first on college campus and they start to encounter these falsehoods that are told about the Jewish people and the Jewish state, the first thing that they're most likely to do is go to Google and look it up. And if they are able to encounter, at the very least, truth as well as inaccuracies, they may be able to distinguish fact from fiction, put that together with what they've learned growing up and what they know to be true from their homes and from their households, and come more or less unscathed, maybe even stronger, with a stronger understanding of how to respond to the various accusations that they may face on a daily basis. But if they're not going to have access to the correct information at their fingertips at the time when it's needed, then of course you risk losing people in the process. So that ties into what I was saying earlier, that it's a fundamental important for us, all of us, every person who is in the business of creating information, if you will, propagating information, whether it's news, whether it's commentary, whether it's analysis, whether it's incredible books like the ones that Annika and Melanie have both written. It's a duty that we have to take on ourselves to make sure that that this information is available, it's readily available, it's spread widely, it's easily accessible, so that the youth and those that will encounter and form their worldview through new and modern means will have ready and steady access to the truth and to understand history and their place in the world.
The last question that we're only going to get a minute each of you to answer, which is your advice for ordinary people watching this on what they can do to make the situation better. Because in the end, in these days of social media, we're all journalists, even though we don't all get paid for it, and certainly not paid well. So Dovid, first, what is your 1 minute piece of advice to the viewers here?
In today's world, every single individual is an editor-in-chief. Really, there is access at our fingertips. And, I say this as somebody who comes from who is descended from people who at times in their history, like all of us, would have given anything just for the opportunity to be heard. And today we can all, each of us, can reach millions with the click of a button. And there are a lot of different tools that are available, but I would say that it is a duty and a responsibility today for every single individual person to find the most readily available platforms that they have to influence and advocate to their community and for their community, and make sure to take that to heart. It was my friend, Marty Peretz, the famed editor and publisher, who wrote that defending the Jewish nation in the nasty and mendacious battleground of ideas subverted by lies is the greatest challenge that our people face. I would even make the case that the act of Zionism today involves a post on social media or an email to your friends on a daily basis. Propagate the we can all be a part of it.
Okay, Annika, what's your advice in less than a minute for what ordinary people can and should?
So I won't be gloomy then, for once. I would say that Jewish pride is contagious. And that on social media is a very powerful thing. So if I'm in this case speaking to Jews or non-Jews, Zionism, pride and joy is contagious. And if there's something that, I try to do when I'm not gloomy or fighting somebody is to express that as often as I possibly can. And that's, apart from the hateful messages I get, those are the most common messages I get, expressions of gratitude for that, whether it be, going to shul or doing a holiday with my kids or being in Israel. There's also no substitute for actually going to Israel. So if I'm not going to do the work of the state, I'll say there is really no substitute for going to Israel and telling people about what you actually see there and what you experience. I think that's a great thing. But I agree with Dovid. Of course, it matters, the amplification of voices. Does it matter? Yes, it does. Of course it does. And if nothing else, it makes those of us, and I think we're all included on this panel, those of us who are in the trenches and do this fight, it makes us feel a lot less lonely. And so it does matter, but I'm pushing for the Jewish pride angle because I think that's incredibly important, and expressing that on social media, pride and joy, and expressing that in social media and your daily life. There's no substitute for it.
Well, my name means joy, so I appreciate that. And Melanie, you have the last word, the last bit of advice for the masses who are watching you here, wondering frustratedly, what can I do to make it better?
Well, not everybody can write, but everybody can pass on material that they read. And as has been said, social media offers the opportunity in an unrivaled and unprecedented way to make information known to lots and lots of people simply by passing it on. That's the first thing. The second thing is that for Jewish people, I think there's a duty to learn. I think many Jewish people, even people who are well educated in Jewish matters, need to learn more about Judaism, about Israel, about Jewish history, in order to deepen their knowledge, in order to understand better what it is that people don't understand around them, and therefore what it is that they, as Jews, keen to defend the state of Israel, need to pass on and to do to improve that situation.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Melanie, Dovid, and Annika, and thank you to all of you who have been watching our Conversations on Zionism series here at Jewish National Fund. And thank you for your support for JNF. Have a wonderful day. Shalom from Jerusalem.
To watch this and all of our past episodes, go to ZTV, our Zionism Studios YouTube page, and subscribe to get notifications.